Welcome to In the Space. I'm your host, Martin Sweeney, and I will be talking with friends, artists, activists, neighbors, and leaders about disability and community. In the Space is a virtual conversation acknowledging and celebrating disability culture and identity in all its history, diversity, and creative self-expression. Our thanks to Pasadena Media for making this broadcast possible. Welcome to another episode of In the Space. Today, we welcome painter Barbara Romain. Barbara earned a Bachelor's in Fine Arts degree from the Philadelphia College of Art and a Master's in Fine Arts degree from the Otis College of Art and Design in Los Angeles. A few of the venues where her paintings have been shown include the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the San Diego Art Institute, the San Francisco Art Commission Gallery, the Los Angeles Municipal Gallery, the Holter Museum in Helena, Montana, the Watts Towers Art Center Gallery, and the Terrence Gallery of the John F. Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Diagnosed with a rare form of retinitis pigmentosa in 1984, Barbara is legally blind. Currently, she is a professor at Columbia College Hollywood School of Film and Television in Tarzana, California. Welcome, Barbara.
Hi, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
A couple years back, the Pasadena Accessibility and Disability Commission put together an artist showcase in which some of your work was screened, and that was over at the Pasadena Foursquare Church. A very exciting event for us. And you were telling me about an experience that you had also had over at the Armory on a workshop, I believe that was conducted by the Center for Digital Storytelling at the Armory. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that collaboration?
Okay, well, first of all, the Artists First exhibition is where we met and first connected. And the Digital Story Project, I believe it was Gail Nichols Ali who was the one who spearheaded that project. And they invited artists, and actually not just artists, but different people with disabilities to tell their story digitally. And this was several years back, so it was still kind of a new concept to have this, again, digital experience of storytelling. And so we came to the Armory several times and wrote the text, and then I had to figure out the imagery that went behind it. And I think you have an example of what it turned out to be.
Yeah.
And I will just say before you show it, there is a double soundtrack on it, which is purposeful. It's kind of like an echoing thing. The double soundtrack is myself and my dear friend Shelley Sachs, who we've done a lot of performance pieces together. And because I could never read the text, often when we were doing performances, she would read it and I would echo her. That was our means of communicating. So that's how we did this. And the musical background was created by my brother, Elliot Levin, who is a jazz musician, saxophonist, and this is his composition, Soul Etude.
Beautiful. Here's the clip. This is Bad Eye on the Good Foot.
For a painter, the world is a feast to be devoured by the eyes. Moving to Los Angeles from gray Philadelphia was dazzling. The bright, sun-drenched colors and the drama of Hollywood where I settled inspired many paintings. When I was diagnosed with a retinal degenerative disease, I questioned my ability to continue painting, a passion in my life for which I had been professionally trained. The Swiss cheese holes in my vision and limited depth perception and peripheral vision were transforming my visual world from a colorful banquet to a plain wrap fast food snack. I decided to focus on what was still possible. I began to abstract the forms in my paintings. I was still interested in my Hollywood friends, neighborhood, and my life as a woman, mother, and worker, but I was becoming less interested in what I could see and more in what I could hear, remember, and imagine. I now create original stencils to form images which I can no longer draw freehand. They become icons and symbols of natural forms. My color palette grows more vivid as my sight diminishes. I am inspired by the world of sound, music, and language. Gestures in response to the guitar line, the drums, the lyrics of a particular song form layers in the paintings. Text in many languages and conversational rhythms create weavings of words where viewers are invited to create their own poetry.
Well, that was, I think, a real interesting introduction to sort of the scope of your work across several years. This show is interested in exploring disability and culture. So just as a word before we go much further, for our audience, my interest is in disability as a life experience and not as a diagnosis. So when I first heard about a blind painter or a blind photographer, like many people, I was both confused and curious because I was thinking, without sight, how could you paint? Or how could you shoot a photograph? So what we're going to do, Barb, is we're going to sort of walk through some of your work. And I'd love to have you narrate some of these slides as we go through. So here's an early 3 paintings, Hollywood Boulevard West, view of Santa Monica Boulevard, and Lunch in the Canyon, which when I saw them really reminded me, my coming from Ohio, of the unique light in California. What was your early painting sort of focus?
You hit it right on the head, Marty. That's I think coming from like gray, as I said in the other piece, the gray Philadelphia. You are dazzled by the light of Los Angeles. It's got a special golden glow, and the palm trees and the sunshine.
And then this next slide we're beginning to move into, and I grew up at the same time, so I think I like a lot of your work because it reminds me of early Hollywood, and well, early Hollywood for me. And this particular piece, Pool Shark, it gave me a sense of what Hollywood was all about. But your style is already changing. So what year is this piece? Do you have an idea?
This was early 80s, not early 80s, but the mid 80s, maybe 85, 86.
Get that? Okay. And then these are 3 more pieces from Hollywood. You've got Xmas on Hollywood Boulevard, Hotel Hollywood, and Cruising the Boulevard. So people can kind of see what's happening there.
It kind of harkened back to the 70s when that was a really rough area.
These 3 pieces begin to really, I thought, explore the change of your palette and the change of your figurative sort of focus.
Yeah, these were a painting a day series. I was for a couple months I did a painting a day for that month. So the 2/15, or the 13, whatever it was, that was that date. So I did that painting in one day. And yeah, just thinking about the vision loss, which was certainly coming more into play in my life, and just the stresses and whatever for each day that these represented.
Well, I would imagine that would have been such a dramatic experience that you might have even questioned your ability to continue as an artist, or not.
I did question my ability to continue as an artist, and my early work, as you saw, was a lot more figurative and representational, and I had to think, well, wait a minute, what is it that I still can do, and what am I interested in doing? And this is how these things evolved.
On the screen right now, we've moved to Bisexual, Whose Myth Are Used With, and Tower of Babel. And I pulled those three together because obviously you are now aggressively using language. Tell us a little bit about that.
The Bisexual was a piece, actually, I did that when I was in graduate school at Otis, and the Whose Myth Are Used With, that's based on, again, my brother Elliot's, he's a poet as well as a jazz musician. This is his poem, and it's Velcro on little cardboard. It's like what do they call it? Refrigerator magnets.
Oh, wow, that's great.
It's big. It's like 6 feet big.
Why language as part of your focus in some of these paintings?
Well, I don't know if it was a conscious decision as much as because my sight was going, I was depending more on my hearing, I guess. And language, people talking is something I can totally pick up on. And
well, it almost became part of your palette. I mean, it did become part of your palette.
Absolutely.
The three pieces that are up there now, Born Under a Bad Sign, Purple Haze, and Children of the Revolution, also resonated for me because of those songs. So tell us a little bit about your work and how it intersects with contemporary music.
Well, I love listening to music as I work, of course, but with the text and the sound, I like to try to build layer upon layer of, perhaps the guitar part, I would layer one color or one brush movement, or with each consecutive part of the musical sound, I would put on another layer of imagery. And then the text would come last, the lyrics.
Here are two more of those, Hard Rain and When the Music's Over.
Yeah.
So this is also very Southern California, very Los Angeles, with the Doors on When the Music's Over. And I have to say,
these pieces, most of them are very large. When the Music's Over is like 8 feet wide by 6 feet high. And I like to kind of put my body into the work. Because it's hard for me to see small detail, I can more easily do larger gestures. And of course, bright color is something I can see more than very, very subtle things.
These three pieces, again, sort of resonated at living here in Southern California. You've got Mother Earth, Terremoto, and Chicken Little. So you've got Mother Nature acting up, you got the earthquake, and you got the fires.
Yeah,
and are those large pieces as well?
Yes, the Terremoto was 6 foot square. It was a reaction, of course, to the 94 quake here in Los Angeles, which I lived through, and we all did, those of us who were here. And Chicken Little, yes, it was a response to a horrible fire season several years back. Nothing actually, probably not even as bad as we've had recently, but it was a bad year. And Mother Earth actually was an homage to my mother, who had just recently passed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Here are two pieces, Dialogue Piece and Dialogue Star. You told me a little story about that. Why don't you give us some background and we'll go
these are both 6 foot square paintings. They are were in response to a call for art from the Montana Human Rights Commission and the Montana Helena Art Museum. They wanted to put on an exhibition called Speaking Volumes, Transforming Hate. And they asked artists to take these books that were written by this white supremacist in the area and that were very racist and anti-Semitic and, just the usual nonsense, and take the books and somehow turn them into some kind of art. Now, there was a huge response. There was a lot of different things that were made from the books. Mine was kind of more, as you can see, collage. I took pages from the books. They've actually sent us cartons of the books that we could use them.
Wow.
And I collaged the pages from the books, and I took out some of the worst language that was in there and tried to turn the sentences into something that was positive.
And now we get a little into sort of body politic. This has got her story, his story, and God's half-witted brother, which was, I think, the first piece of yours that I ever saw, and that was actually at an opulent mobility show in Ventura County. And what had jumped out of me was the language pre-existing condition with the international symbol of disability, the little guy with the wheelchair.
Well, this piece actually was based on an African mythology. There's a story about God's half-witted brother. In other words, God is perfect and created the beauty and perfection of the earth. But then he had this half-witted brother who kind of screwed everything up. So I just love that idea. And somehow I thought about, my own situation and the idea of disability and how the world, for us is not always perfect. And, but not horrible either. It's like part of the wonder of the world and the pre-existing condition. I was thinking more in terms of, this has gone back in time since forever.
And the two pieces that we're looking at now, Mother Worker, Ruler Witch, and A Woman's Work is Never Done. I thought those were also very powerful in terms of just the politics.
These were earlier, but not earlier than the first ones, but these were like around my grad school time, actually, in the early 90s. About women and, of course,
and
myself.
How much collage work do you bring into your work?
A Woman's Work is Never Done has a lot of collage, as you can see. These are actually, interestingly, and the early work too, are oil paintings. I don't do oil painting. Most of the other work, the language work, is all in acrylic, but I used to work more in oil.
And now we're going into some slides that show some of your more contemporary work. Right now we're looking at Lost Lady Train, Let's Dance, and Walk on Gilded Splinters. Tell us about that.
Okay, well, we'll start with it's Last Lady Train. The train refers to John Coltrane, and this was based on the music, again, of my brother. He had a recording where this was one of the tracks, and I just liked it. And again, the movement and the gestures of the colors refer to different movements and gestures of different instruments, and then the text is layered on top, and then there's these other kind of symbols in there that are stencils that I created that I just felt matched the feeling of the work. Walk on Gilded Splinters, that was a Dr. John song about New Orleans. And underneath, there's this text of a poem that my late husband wrote. He was a poet and a writer, and it was about St. Louis Cemetery. So there's that text, and then layered on top is the music of Dr. John.
Work, I guess the work changes as you paint it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, again, improvisation and spontaneity are really a big part of it. Although I have some sort of conceptual idea ahead of time on terms of maybe colors and like what basic to big text I may want to use. But as it goes along, it kind of just has to grow itself.
And then this is a piece, Requiem, same time period?
Oh no, this is pretty recent. This is in the last year or two. I don't know. I guess thinking about death. Maybe I'm getting older, but and, you know, my husband had passed, but I wanted to have some positivity to it. There's a little butterfly at the top, the little pink butterfly.
Was this done prior to the COVID virus?
Yes.
Wow.
Maybe I was, predicting it.
Yeah. And then this piece, Quarantine, I take it, does.
That was done at the beginning of the COVID quarantine. Yes, about a year ago.
TikTok.
Yeah.
We wound up going through a very long TikTok.
Absolutely. And I think time was something that was, expanded and contracted during the quarantine. I mean, we were just not used to being in this kind of timeless.
The last two slides, these three are monoprints that you did for a project they told me about in terms of the Braille Institute. And we're going to take a quick look at another piece, which was Into the Light, that you were beginning to tell me about, dealt with an organization in Chicago, I believe.
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about what I want to do here is I want to move from the work and then begin to talk a little bit about how all this informs identity and culture.
At first I was in the closet, to tell you the truth, about my disability. I didn't want people to know that I was losing my sight, and it took me a while to actually come out as a blind person. But when I finally kind of made that leap and, went to the Braille Institute, it was such a nice relief because I was with people who were going through similar experience. And I used to say it kind of felt like a vacation for me to go there because everything was set up for a blind person. You didn't have to worry about, tripping over something or not being able to find the bathroom or, I don't know, just little simple things that most people take for granted. And but of course, the main beautiful thing about it was after I learned to read Braille, they have all these workshops there, these artist workshops. That one was very interesting. That one, I responded to this call for art from the Blind Services Administration in Chicago, and they were having new offices and they wanted to decorate their offices. And I proposed this project where I would do these paintings that incorporated texts from their clients. And each painting has a theme, and I sort of sent them a questionnaire that they could talk with their clients about, and they sent me back responses, and then I incorporated those responses into the paintings. Apparently, I sent them the paintings and they installed them, and the feedback I got was that the clients love them. So even though they're not really accessible to the totally blind, I guess a lot of their clients had some vision. And that is true of many blind people. I think people don't really realize that not everyone who is blind is totally blind. A lot of people have some, it's like being hard of hearing. They have some vision, but not, full vision.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to do a PSA encouraging people with disabilities to get vaccinated. So when we come back from our break, I'd like to sort of explore a little bit more about these issues around identity and culture. What are you waiting for? 4th of July, anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Why wait any longer? Get vaccinated today. Schedule your appointment at myturn.ca.gov. If you do not have internet access or need assistance scheduling an appointment, contact the Pasadena Citizens Service Center at 626-744-7311, Monday through Friday, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. So if you haven't been vaccinated, get vaccinated. I want to take a deeper look at this idea of disability as a life experience and how that informs your art. So can you go a little bit deeper about, you had mentioned that it took you a while to integrate the loss of vision into, I guess, your identity. I don't even know, we haven't talked about this, but I don't even know if you identify with the word disability. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, honestly, as an artist, I've sort of not consciously thought of myself as a blind artist that much. A friend of mine once said, my former friend and partner, Miralani, told me, when people talk about blind artists, say, well, Beethoven, deaf composer, it's like, it's not about the disability more as much as it is about the art.
Where can people find out more about your work and have a chance to take a longer look at it?
I have a website, barbararomain.com. It's a little, it needs updating, but a lot of the work that you've seen here today and much more is on there. I'm currently in a show in a gallery which I've exhibited in quite a few times, and I think coming up will be some more, which is the Neutra Museum and Institute here in Silver Lake, on Glendale Boulevard. Very interesting. Was the offices of the architect Richard Neutra, who passed away a few years ago, but they've turned it into a gallery. So I've been showing there. And Gallery 825, as I mentioned, on La Cienega. I show there occasionally, and lately several virtual shows. And coming up, maybe something in Laguna, at the Laguna Art Gallery, but that hasn't been set up yet. So that.
Well, I've really enjoyed our visit today.
Same here.
I think I have some kind of soul connection with you because I feel we must have been in the same room together at some point in their late 70s or early 80s. I know a lot of the people, and it was a special time, as today is a special time. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I'll be looking for your work, and thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be asked. Thanks.
Great.